In the epic struggle for control of Taranaki, Waitara was the flashpoint. Waitara was the prize. Settlers wanted it as much as Māori were determined to keep it. In 1860, Waitara was the spark that ignited conflict that raged through the entire province for the next 20 years. For Māori, it ended much as it began, with the ransacking of their lands and mana, the bitter cost of daring to defend themselves against what essentially was a home invasion. The last line of defence for Te Ātiawa was here, behind the palisades and fortifications of Pukerangiora. It remains a lasting, if largely forgotten, symbol of Māori resistance and resilience. Kia ora, I'm Mihi Ngārangi Forbes. Join us for Stories of Waitara. The story begins here, at Manuapou, South Taranaki, 1854. Hundreds of Te Ātiawa and other iwi gather for an extraordinary meeting of chiefs.
They met to talk about the impact of colonisation in this region. They understood that the selling of land for what the government was offering was not worth pursuing. They understood that the value of the land was far better if they retained land and developed it economically. And in that hui, they made the commitment not to sell land. In the hui, they passed around a toki, the name of the toki, o kurukuru, and as arrived in each person's hands, they uttered these words, the oath, tangata tōmua, whenua tōmuri. People would give their lives before they gave their lands to sale. Leaders from throughout Taranaki came together in that hui. That included Te Rangitake. Te Rangitake was a leader focused in on peace. He was a diplomat. He was someone who sought to build relationships. Rere tā whangawhanga, his father said, kia kaue tuku a Waitara kia makere atu I te kapu o tō ringa. And Te Rangitake was the person for that. And of course, Te Matakatea, the most recognised military leader within Taranaki of his time. He had honed skills of strategy and warfare all through the previous musket wars, and he shared those skills with others such as Hapurona. Hapurona, as a young man, fought alongside Te Matakatea. He had fought within many of the key battles with Waikato and other tribes from the north. He was the person that gave confidence to his people, knowing that they would be led into war. Ko te mate o te whenua, ko te mate o te tangata. That is the type of leader you need when you go to war.
And so our people said, e kore mātou e tuku I te whenua, ki te hoko. Hei nohoanga mō te Pākehā. Whakatūria ngā pau. Ko kurukuru ki runga, ko taipake ki raro. Ka tikina e Te Ātiawa, ka whakatūria tōna pau ko Waitaha. Ka herea te whenua, ka herea te tangata. Ka whakairia te henu tapu ki runga ki ngā whata. He pata ua no te rangi ka oti te hiri ki te whenua. He paua auahi no te whenua ka oti te hiri ki te rangi. So these proclamations and statements and policies were sanctified by clear oaths and agreed to by all those present at Manuapou.
Well, for many Pākehā, the Manuapou hui is seen as the start of a land league, and it's seen as a threat to this desire to acquire further lands.
Nearby, in the settlement of New Plymouth, the decisions made at Manuapo have a profound impact. No more Māori land for sale meant settlers were largely confined to the town limits, and they were furious.
Pākehā didn't travel halfway around the world to play second fiddle to people that they regarded as inferior to themselves. And so New Plymouth, it's a settlement that's frustrated by the fact that they deem that they don't have enough land to farm, and there is this intense pressure that builds up through the 1850s as a result of that. And so Waitara is seen as an ideal place to acquire further lands.
The land within Taranaki is extremely fertile. Ki ana he whenua mōmona, rich volcanic soils. Most things will flourish within these conditions. Gardening was one of the main activities of Taranaki through that period. They developed economic base by selling the kai that they produced, and Pākehā coming into the regions could look upon the soil and quickly realise the fertility of this region. They planted kumara, taiwa, pumpkins, and wheat. And they traded those crops with the settlement in New Plymouth. Not far away, the Pākehā were looking towards the land that was accessible to Māori and the developments that were taking place, and the tension rose. They cultivated in an area, a river delta, at the mouth of Waitara River, which was their main expressway heading inland. They could carry their kai on waka right up the river.
The Waitara dispute is really about two different understandings of how Māori and Pākehā should live together. On the one hand, the Crown is in charge, and by implication settlers are as well, and that conforms with their notions that they are superior to Māori, because that's what a lot of Pākehā firmly believe. But that doesn't accord with the reality on the ground, where Māori are still incredibly powerful and in many ways dominating the economy and in charge of their own affairs.
Waitara doesn't have the significance it once had. But by the late 1850s, settlers would stop at nothing to get it. Waitara was prime real estate. So Crown land agents set about manipulating a sale from a local chief, Te Teira Manuka. It was classic divide and rule.
And it's hard because I don't want to villainise Te Teira. He has that position within our history where it's easy to say, nā te he. It's not a nice thing for everyone to drag their tupuna's name up every time. The real culprits were the Crown. Well, their sole job was to separate the people from their land. Crown agents like McLean, the glorified real estate agents, were running around looking to buy land off whoever would sell it.
Donald McLean came from quite a modest background in the Scottish Highlands, and the clan system that was not dissimilar for Māori, was fluent in Māori and had, I think, quite a in-depth understanding of Māori society, knew many of the rangatira, had close relationships with them. But he was also the leading figure in terms of Crown purchasing, so he, in a way, he kind of exploited the knowledge that he had of Māori in order to further the Crown's ends. McLean is instrumental in advising Governor Gore Brown that Te Tere has a right to sell those lands.
And he would have known the consequences of that purchase.
He knew that I think that there was going to be some kind of impending showdown as a result of that, because previously it wasn't the usual practice to purchase lands from individuals, especially when the rest of the owners disputed that. And so the notion that Te Tere could sell those lands on his own without the consent of the leading rangatira of the community and the rest of the people of Waitara was something new and shocking for Māori. February 1860, the British attempt to survey the disputed lands, and the owners send out kuia to pull out the survey pegs, which is seen as a way of signalling opposition to the supposed purchase without doing that in a confrontational way. And the Crown's response to that really is quite extraordinary, because they call this an act of rebellion, pulling out survey pegs in the ground, and they declare martial law over the Taranaki province.
It having become necessary to issue the Governor's proclamation, placing the district under martial law, I deem it advisable, in order to prevent unnecessary alarm among the settlers, to assure them that should events lead to actual collision with the natives, due notice will be given to enable them to provide for the safety of their families. G.F. Murray, Lieutenant Colonel.
They could see that one of the first things that the government did when they purchased land was to survey. And the surveyors came in and laid pegs down to divide the land, to determine what was Pākehā land and what was Māori.
Part of the rules of those days is that you couldn't buy disputed land. One of the rules was that only the Queen could buy land off our rangatira. In that case for Waitara, we were made absolutely sure that people knew that this was a disputed land. Right from the time of the surveyors coming to pick it up to our old people going out and pulling out those survey pegs to show their opposition to it.
We have a story about one of our kuia, Keita, who was one of the first to start pulling up pegs to demonstrate to the government that this is Māori land, kei a tātou te rangatiratanga o tēnei whenua. And Keita pulled those pegs as what was perhaps the first act of resistance in this way, protest against the acquisition of land, the forced acquisition of lands within Taranaki. For our kuia Keita to have done this on these lands is both symbolic and also an act of great courage, knowing soldiers and the surveyors were there, but she stood and pulled the pegs out in plain sight to demonstrate to them that she did not recognise the act of surveying land and they did not recognise the purchase of this land.
With martial law in place, hostilities were now inevitable. Veteran warrior chief Hapurona emerges as the military leader and tactician. The man and the hour have met.
Hapurona had a different experience in war. Hapurona had been up in the far north, and so that experience in fighting the Pākehā came to the fore as a person we needed when we were invaded by the British Army.
A large gathering was called in New Plymouth by the government. A large feast was held for all of those who attended. It was attended by people such as Te Teira, Te Rangitake and Hapurona and many, many others. And it was there the karaki that Hapurona composed, advocating peace, ko te karaki o te maungarongo, coming from a person who was recognised for his skill, his strategy in war. His words meant something when he was the one advocating that Taranaki did not want war, it wanted peace.
Ka mate hiro e tū take ke tāni te tumutei nei tō tua tāni te taurike tei nei tō tua. Ko e taia mingi mingi ko e ngārara tuatara ko e wakaka tuki tuki a ko e wakaka wā ia ko e waka waka rere. Kei runga nei tētei pō, kei raro nei tētei pō. Pō ki tupua tētei pō, pō ki tawito tētei pō. Ura mā nea nea kataka te pō, hia kataka te pō.
Hapurona said, I've seen war, I've seen what war gives the people, and we do not want this for Te Ātiawa. We do not want this for Taranaki, and what starts in Waitara will very quickly escalate to the whole country.
He matua o ki te wānanga, he matua o ki arangi nui e tūnei. Kei piri, kei tata mai o ki kia au e tūnei. E rongo e o kairi ake ki runga, Tūturu waka maua kia tina, tina ui e, tāeki e.
But the crown was not for turning. The British set up a garrison in Waitara, and in response, Hapurona hastily builds a fortified pā at Te Ātiawa, overlooking the garrison's main route back to New Plymouth. And today, there's nothing here. Nothing at all, not even a signpost to mark this place, Te Ātiawa Pā, as one of the most significant sites in New Zealand's history.
For us in Taranaki, the 17th of March in 1860 was the most important date. That was the date where the first shots were fired upon Te Ātiawa Pā.
Te Ātiawa was a statement. Te Ātiawa was a statement by our people in clear view of the Crown's military camp that this is our whenua. You can't just come here and say that we've surveyed it, therefore we've bought it, therefore it's ours. There wasn't a major battle there, as much as it was the major signal that the Crown had started hostilities against us without provocation.
From a Māori perspective, that was all important. If Māori had launched the first attack, well, then we would have been in the wrong. However, the Crown had done that. That demonstrated that they were the aggressor.
Following on from that, it was considered that the Te Ātiawa cause was a just one and that others would then come to their assistance and aid them. Almost immediately, there are articles from Waikato and so on.
It was attacked by the Crown, thinking that this is where Te Ātiawa was going to hold their ground and to take a stand. But when they attacked, there was no one in there. The people within it had all left.
The assumption on the Crown side was that there would be a quick, easy victory. And this is the source of immense frustration. And these assumptions of an easy victory, they don't bear fruit.
We have a kōrero about a young kōtiro. Ka koa te tamahine whakaaria te iringa niu. She was sent to climb to the top of Te Iringa Niu, the tallest peak within the Kaitake Ranges, to send a message to the iwi of Taranaki to the south, that the war within Waitara had begun.
This waiata e korepori tonu, that's a Waitara waiata. In a couple of the lines it reflects on the young girl. They sent this young girl because they knew that if any of the soldiers or the military saw a young girl running, they wouldn't take any notice of her, rather than if it was a young boy running, it would be more suspect. So they do this so that she could successfully get there to warn Taranaki people that Waitara were in war. She goes up to Te Ringa Niu and she lights fire. And it's the smoke signals that let Taranaki people know that there's a cry of need on this side.
By now, New Plymouth is really spooked. And so are the troops here at the Omata Stockade, a fort just a few k's south of the colonial settlement. That's because a little further down the coast at Kaipopo Pa, Waireka, Te Ātiawa and southern tribes were gathering, determined to uphold the oath they'd made at Manuapo, no more land sales. The stockade is vulnerable, so just 11 days after the Battle of Te Kohia, British regulars and militia march on Kaipopo. But this time, Māori choose to stand and fight.
Within the pa was Te Matakatea. Te Matakatea led the group in the front of the pa and sent his men to the back of the pa, knowing that if they would be attacked, it would most likely be from that location. As they were being attacked from the rear, confusion started to grow. And from what I was told, Te Matakatea stood and called the people to hold the ground, to hold the pa, and not give in. But it was in that battle that many of the main leaders from Taranaki iwi were killed, with Te Matakatea and others managing to escape.
There are mixed accounts of what happened next, but what we do know is that Kaipopo was ultimately overwhelmed by imperial troops.
For Taranaki iwi, and actually for Ngāti Ruanui as well, it was devastating. Devastating because one of the ariki of the tribe for Taranaki iwi, Paora Kukutai, perished there. He was shot. And there were a lot of others that were killed, and there are accounts where they were carrying people back in stretchers from here, further south, back into their rohe.
And did the attacks continue?
Absolutely. So the Navy under Captain Craycroft shifted out of Waireka and Kaipopo and then came back into town here. They all loaded up on the government steamer and they continued down the coast and bombed the people as they were carrying their wounded back home.
So this one, Hugh Harris, was cruelly murdered by the rebel Māori at Waitara.
Yeah, it's remarkably strong language, isn't it? Which kind of speaks to a mindset that all of these references to rebel Māori, to murder and so on, there's kind of this idea that it was the Crown fighting a just war rather than Māori.
And I guess if you didn't have the full story and this is the only narrative that you stroll past, you know, you would be forgiven for thinking that it was a one-sided war.
Yeah, that's right.
After Waireka, a ceasefire is ordered, and it lasts almost 3 months. But Te Ātiawa General Hapurona immediately starts building a twin pa stronghold at Puketakauere, close to where the war began.
Again, we see the approach used by Hapurona when he established two pa. Puketakauere, that was standing off to the side, and then another one in the more traditional sense of a pa at Onuku Kaitara.
The twin pa are a deception. Yes, they're manned, but they're largely decoys. The real strength lies outside the palisades.
And so again, the strategy played out as Hapurona had planned. We see the approach used by Hapurona putting his enemy in a position of weakness, attacking the traditional pa, and all of the time having his forces hidden in a position of strength.
As one British officer remarked, The pa looked innocent enough from the outside, theirs for the taking. So 350 men were primed and readied to teach the natives a lesson they'd never forget. It was a masterful plan. The veteran fighting chief Hapurona had fortified both pa, Puketakawere and Onuku Kaitara, and he'd anticipated the troops would attack from the garrison over there in Waitara, and sure enough, they did. But what they didn't expect was this. The bulk of Hapurona's men weren't in the pa, they were hidden in rifle pits like this in between the two. The trap was set. After an artillery bombardment comes a full frontal British assault. Army and Navy vying to take the pa first. But little do they know what's in store. Hapurona's elaborate network of defences has been completely overlooked by their officers. Charging into the open, they're caught in a withering crossfire. They don't know what's hit them.
The British were kind of lulled into a trap, really, and it's really disastrous for the British, and it is seen as a major defeat. The British suffer their heaviest defeat of the war. Nearly 1/5 of their number end up as casualties, I think 30 killed and 34 wounded. So it's really quite a humiliating blow.
The assault ends in complete disarray. In the bush and in the swamp, fleeing soldiers make for easy targets. An unthinkable setback for imperial prestige. But for Māori, it's payback. Utu for Waireka. Today there's not much to show for the dramatic events that unfolded here. Onuku Kaitara is on private land, a paddock for cows. Back then, these gullies were the only paths of retreat to nearby Camp Waitara. But they were also treacherous swamps. And if the fleeing troops thought they'd experienced the worst of it, they were badly mistaken.
Before these two pa was a whole network of repo, of swamps and streams. And this being the middle of June meant that it was extremely cold, the middle of winter. And we understand that the soldiers that were attacking these pa suffered hypothermia because of the cold.
Trapped and disoriented, the survivors were picked off by an ever-present enemy. Some drown, overwhelmed by sheer exhaustion. There are accounts of Hapurona himself challenging a British officer to the death. Sword versus taiaha. The taiaha won.
It's said that a number of the bodies of those who were killed lay in that swamp for weeks afterwards. And this is also seen as a source of humiliation, that even those who are killed are not retrieved and given decent burial.
News of the defeat sends shockwaves through the settler community.
At the end of June 1860, there's kind of panic in the settlement of New Plymouth, and there is this decision made to evacuate the women and children because it's no longer considered safe. A lot of them go to Nelson. Within New Plymouth itself, You know, the conditions there become pretty appalling too over time, and you get, over the space of a year, about 120 people die of disease and illness and so on because of the cramped conditions there.
On the upper reaches of the Waitara River, Te Ātiawa have dug in at Pukerangiora.
The tactics that our people had back then when fighting against larger numbers and more guns was to make a stand, let the opposition expend their energy and then tactically withdraw to the next place. And so our people were constantly preparing the next place to withdraw to.
It's their last desperate line of defence, a last-ditch, all-in effort to push back the invaders. Shooting pits, tunnels, bunkers, palisades.
This was a significant part. It was a place where the people of Te Ātiawa had defended themselves on many occasions in the past.
But by December 1860, the British make a crucial change of tactics that literally alters the landscape and shifts the balance of power.
3.5 kilometres of saps were built by the troops to get close enough to the pa to make their attack.
This is such a fundamental shift in warfare for the British. Up until this point, they'd used full frontal assaults on Pa. Now their engineers were constructing deep covered trenches or saps to protect their advancing soldiers.
There's a huge number of people involved, and the sapping operation is quite a sophisticated one, but it's a very, very slow one. And for people wanting quick progress, they can't see it here. They want to see a major defeat inflicted on Māori, but it doesn't happen. The sapping operation begins in December 1860, and it's still going in March 1861. So months and months of sapping.
In all, a force of 1,000 men and some 1,500 metres of trench lines. It's the most ambitious military engineering project in the colony to date. The saps, much of them covered for protection, are reinforced with earth-filled manuka baskets called gabions. Not only is it back-breaking work inching their way forward, but the engineers can barely raise their heads without being targeted by an unexpected and deadly foe.
E tū tama wahine te wā o te kore. This was a statement made in Pariaka, and we see the same activity there at Pukerangiora in that battle against the troops of the Crown. They held the role just as much as men in defending Te Ātiawa against the onslaught of the troops. Holding positions, picking off the soldiers one by one. Similarly, using strategy to maintain a position of strength within their pa. Ka mihi ki o tātou wahine. Tō rātou maia, tō rātou manoa nui. Such strength, such character, such courage.
But after months of bombardment, skirmishes and bloodshed, and in the face of such overwhelming odds, the Te Ātiawa defenders are left with no real choice. Rather than fight to the last, they abandon Pukerangiora and melt into the bush. Their allies head home. By March 1861, a shaky ceasefire is in effect. But after a year of fighting, there's no real military conclusion. And this is just the start. In the years to come, there'll be more battles. But as for this first Taranaki war, the cost is enormous. The countryside is devastated, the economy in ruins. What is it like for someone from Waitara to live in a community where you're reminded constantly by the street names and the blocks of lands of those men who took your land?
It's not so much the signs on the streets, but the hardest thing is to see rangatira whānau of Waitara still living hard, still not being able to produce their own goods, still not being able to support their own families. It's sad to see an education system that still denies them that knowledge. It's sad to see a judicial system which provides justice to everyone except our own. So the street signs, well, that will remind us who the bad guys are.
"160 years on from what began at Waitara, so much of Taranaki's past remains unresolved. And here in the church grounds of Old St Mary's, New Plymouth, the bitter legacy still echoes across the divide."
Well, this is quite a contrast. A single headstone on the furthest corner of the church grounds.
Yeah, you couldn't get any further away really, and this is where a number of rangatira are buried, and it was considered too offensive to bury them with the British and Crown soldiers in the cemetery. So they're in the grounds of the vicarage, as you say, the furthest corner of the church property.
I think if I was a descendant of Te Ātiawa or a descendant of Wetini Taiporu too, I would feel like my rangatira, my ancestors, hadn't been respected.
Tau mai ki roto pukerangi ora I te rangi nei me te māturu mai o te ua. Ka tika hoki ki a ua ki runga I a tātou I tēnei rā. Ko rongo tēnei, ko piri mai ki runga ki tēnei wenua. Ka ki atu he pata ua ki te rangi ka oti te hiri ki te wenua, he pawa ua ki runga I te wenua ka oti te hiri ki te rangi. Tea I o te wenua, tēnā he pakanga ki te ua o te rangi. Ana, kei konei tātou I roto I te ua he tohu o te ora.
Walking these forgotten trenches from a largely forgotten war and remembering the stories. The weight of loss is still heavy in the air. Lands lost through confiscation, lost culture, lost identity. For Te Ātiawa, there can be no forgetting, but also there's a determination not to be victim to the past.
You can look back at history and say our tupuna went through all of these conflicts and we're in a better space now. But when you look back at the conflict and say those were never resolved, we are still in a position of being demeaned and being belittled in our own area. Our tupuna constantly said the way forward was peace. The way forward for us is to focus on that legacy that they spoke about, that vision that they focused in. Because if we focus in on the grief and the pain, we constantly pull ourselves back into that grief.
You just like going up there and listening to the water running down in the rawa, looking over the cliff, imagining the whare, te waho, te marangai that used to once stand there, and all the tupuna. And I also think of tamariki, laughter, happy times. And I do recall one time I went up there with my two little moko with me. My moko were running along the top of the trenches and they were both calling and laughing. one of the wahine called out to me and she said, "Waine, o mokopuna." And I'm looking at my babies running and they were just so happy. And I went, "Kei te pai wei ho rāua. Kei te kāinga rāua." So it just made me think like that somber feeling wasn't going to affect my babies.
Today, the great fighting pā at Pukerangiora rests, wreathed in kawakawa.
Kia kā no te tupu o te kawakawa I konei, he tohu ki te mate, engari e aro ana ki te āpōpōtanga, e hoki mai te ora ki runga Pukerangiora, ki runga Te Ātiawa, ki runga I a Taranaki puta atu ki te ao.
The grief of Waitara will not be forgotten. It reminds us of the aspirations our tupuna held for the future.
Puke puke rangi kia ora ati ta witi witi nui te tangi a te tirai raka na ura e raka te kata waka motunga e karere mai koe he wai karu karu nei e riringi Waitara I wai puke puke e keia tata nei te pauri e mautara tara kei ngā wetu o te rangi te ngahau o te poe.
He pūti e tautoko tēnei hōtaka, nā te pūti auaha o te reo irirangi o Aotearoa me te irirangi te motu.